Hello, everyone, and welcome to our amazing virtual author event. I am Shantae Burns Simpson, president of the Black Caucus of the American Library Association. And on behalf of the Prince George's County Memorial Library System and Prince George's County Human Relations Commission, we are so glad you are joining our virtual event. It's my pleasure to introduce the host for this evening, Jamice Harper of Spines and Binds. Spines and Binds is a love affair with books and wine, founded by Jamice Harper, an avid reader and wine enthusiast. She's my people. Jamice's passion for reading diversely led her to create the Diverse Spines hashtag on social media to highlight literature by Black women and women of color. Jamice is a champion for amplifying marginalized voices, and at Diverse Spines has become a valuable literary resource in the book community. Please help me welcome Jamice Harper.
Thank you so much for having me. I am thrilled. I'm really honored to be in conversation with Basi this evening. This is an incredible opportunity. I'm so excited. And I'm just going to tell you a little bit about her. She embodies the brilliance of multifaceted creative minds. The writer, performer, and advocate is the author of the instant New York Times bestselling book. Here's my copy. I'm telling the truth, but I'm lying. Essence Magazine esteemed this debut collection of essays as beautiful and compelling, while Audible defines the writing as both visceral and comforting. The compilation, which went to a second pressing on the day of its release, has earned the mental health activist stunning reviews from readers and media outlets nationwide. Welcome, Basi.
Thank you.
How awesome to be here with you. I'm telling you, I was blown away by this book. And I think I probably tagged you a million times just talking about it. It's absolutely brilliant. I've never read anything like it before. And it's probably, it was on my top 10 last year. And I have recommended it to so many people. It's just incredibly honest and transparent. And so I want to start today by asking you a question that I have to ask you is, how are you doing today, especially in these uncharted times of COVID, quarantine, and then when we were self-isolated? How are you doing?
I'm doing well, all things considered. This is a question that I think that I'm asked a lot because currently, just in general, this is the healthiest I've ever been in my entire life, and I get, progressively healthier. But these are circumstances that are, unforeseen circumstances. And I've realized, something I've spoken to my therapist about, is that I've been equipped to deal with things like this, for a very long time. One of the things that I struggled with very early in this is being, not being able to see people, not going out, having these like restrictions that I put on myself when I'm in a depressive episode to be almost like an environmental depression. Was something that I had to adjust to. And once I was able to remind myself that I'm okay, that I'm handling things well, it's just the environment that I need to adapt to. Once I was able to do that, everything became, it became easier for me, not easy, but definitely easier. And I don't feel like I was in danger of sinking into anything, because I've developed these coping mechanisms for years and years and years,
Mm-hmm. That's good to know. That's very good to know.
How are you?
I'm doing well. Yeah. I am. I found that I was a little bit more creative during these times, but I also found that I was able to do with a lot of less things. Things that you thought that were important or that you needed. I found that I was able to do a little bit less, and then really just to sit in the moment and appreciate time. I think that's the biggest takeaway for me, is just to appreciate time and being away from the people that you love. Just to appreciate the people that are in your life. So slowing down.
Well, for me, it hasn't been a slowing down because the nature of my work is that
Yes.
I can do it from anywhere and people know that. So I feel like I'm busier now than I was before this. Because before I was just traveling, not just traveling, I was traveling. Now it's like, oh, you're home? Here's this thing. You know, so it's like, it's weird because I keep telling people, oh, people keep saying, oh, I've got all this time. I'm like, I've got more time to procrastinate. Like I've got more time to wait until the last minute before I do.
Which is my favorite thing to do, to wait to the last minute. So, oh, another important question, because, you know, we've seen this shift in the atmosphere with the social injustice during the pandemic and how the COVID's impacted people of color, and then the murder of George Floyd and all the spotlight on racism, which we always knew that was there, but there's just a brighter light, and the protests. So how has this moment in time impacted your writing, and what are you writing about?
I'm not writing. I have given myself the space and the grace not to write about things right now. I think that one of the things that I've learned quite early is that there are so many voices. There are so many writers who are able to contextualize this moment in ways that either I can say, oh, I feel like that, or that's a new perspective for me. I don't find it necessary, and this is part of what goes with what I said earlier, which is like that healthy, I don't find it necessary to be a voice or the voice. I find it more beneficial for me to amplify voices. I've been able to stay quiet in a way that I think is necessary for me to handle these moments. About in 2018, I took almost a year off of social media to work on the book. And in that time, I learned how necessary and how unnecessary it is for me to be the first one to comment on something before I've thought it through, before I know what I feel. I'm telling people what I feel before I've processed it. So I spend a lot of time like internally processing things and being very settled in how I feel, and then not necessarily having to express that to, you know, thousands of people at a time constantly. Like I'm very, very conservative, more or less with my thoughts and opinions on things. Like I said, I just really believe that there are people out here who are able to contextualize and articulate what's going on better than I can in a way that I think is much more comforting. I think there's a lot of people who kind of like jump out there and say things before they fully, you know, got all the facts or even just formulated their opinion. So I'm in the mind of sitting back and just letting it happen and not feeling like I have to be part of it. So yeah. I
love that you said that, because I think sometimes when people have a platform, there's an expectation that they speak out. And you know, by you voicing that, it lets me know and other people know that sometimes it's okay just to sit in the moment and not speak out on it until you're ready to speak out on it. And you may never be ready to speak out on it. But I appreciate you saying that.
Yeah, I also think just on a mental wellness front, there is so much happening right now, and it is difficult for even the healthiest of us to deal. Like if it was Ahmaud Arbery, then it was Breonna, then it was George, then someone this morning. Like it's back to back to back to back, and then on top of that, we've got, you know, this epidemic that's killing people, and we're not able to see our families. So I think that we have to be very, very stingy with the emotional output. And I have made it very clear in my actions that I'm not going to speak about everything. I'll say what I need to say, and then I'll move on. If someone's like, oh, Bossy's not talking about, that's just, I mean, that doesn't hurt my feelings. You know, I appreciate people wanting to hear it, but I also know that it's better for me not to be constantly in a state of that, because I can get on Twitter, I'll be fine, get on Twitter for 5 minutes, and I'm so agitated and so worked up and so, you know, all over the place. And it's just, it doesn't work for me. And I think that it works better for other people.
Yes, understood. Yeah. So at what point did you realize you were ready to tell your story in this form of writing, ready to share this with the world?
I don't think I was ever ready. I still don't think I'm ready. But I very recently, and by recently I mean like a week and a half ago, I realized that when I was hospitalized in 2010, that was my second and last hospitalization. I came out and I was fine. But for the past, I guess, 6 years, I was still dealing with all of that. And I thought that I was better because I wasn't in that like dark, like not dark, but I wasn't in that deep space of it. So I just assumed, well, this is better than that other thing, so I'm good. But what I'd realized was that I've been working toward and through things since my first diagnosis. In 2016, I just got back from Nigeria. I was going back and forth, and I realized now again that I was running away to Nigeria because I just didn't want to face things here. And I came back in 2015, and I was in one of the most difficult spaces I've ever been, to the point where I didn't think I was going to make it out. I really thought that was it. And with that in mind, I was saying, you know, I want there to be a record of all of these things that I've experienced. I want people to know how hard it's been. I want people to know how difficult it is. I want people to know how hard I've tried, and not just me, how much people who live, you know, with brains like mine, who live, you know, with these diagnoses, how difficult it is to on a day-to-day basis, and how hard people are working to make sure they're just a minimum of okay. And so I started writing with that in mind. And it wasn't a decision to be vulnerable, but in order for me to convey the magnitude of what this thing was, I had to be vulnerable and I had to be transparent. So I wasn't ready, you know, in that typical, I'm doing this right now, but it became a necessity in that I needed it to explain, and then in ways save my life, and hope that it could explain and save in ways that I was looking for when I was first diagnosed. When I was first diagnosed, I ran home and like searched, like I need a book, I need an essay, I need something that'll help me make sense of this. And I didn't find any. I found very few. Most of them were by white people, most of them by white women. White women disproportionately write about their mental health, I think, more than others. Don't quote me on that. I think I just made that up. But it felt like it was disproportionate. So I wrote the book that I needed in 2004. I wrote the book that I needed, and it turns out that I needed it in 2016, and I needed it in 2019. I needed it yesterday. So yeah, it was a decision made for me.
So after I read the book, it took me at least, I think, 2 or 3 weeks to just kind of sit with it and finally be able to write a review. And I still don't think my review is accurate enough for it, because like I said, I've never read anything like it. It opened my eyes to a lot. But I wanted to know, you talked a lot about the process toward getting your diagnosis and how difficult that was. And so I'm wondering, what's your thoughts on how the medical profession addresses, you know, Black women, and then just the mental health of people of color in general?
Going back to the writing process, I was very adamant about not pathologizing mental health in that as a Black woman. I think so often when our mental health is discussed, it's very academic. It's very impersonal. It's pathologized in that it's to explain something like, you know, 1 out of every 10, you know, Black women is this, because, you know, like there's no humanity to it. There's no understanding of the very lived and very human experiences that we have. And that's something that's always bothered me. I think that the mental health profession in general tends to be, for something as personal as it is, for something as specific as it is, it feels so cold, and it feels so distant, and it feels as though you're not dealing with a real person. You're dealing with some sort of case. You're dealing with a number. You're dealing with a statistic. And that's something that I think is, even in the hospital situation, like, you're not allowed to get flowers. People don't really want to visit because it's this kind of like, it's othered in a way that I think makes it difficult for people to get well or want to stay well. It doesn't provide an environment for people to prioritize their wellness. And I say that as someone who isn't wealthy. I think that wealthier people have the option to go to like these wellness spas and
Yes.
you know, resorts and stuff like that, and the everyday person does not get that. But I do believe that often when we have conversations about Black folks and mental health, it is pathologized. It's used to explain some like maladaptive behavior, or it's used to explain, you know, something. And I think that that's also what prevents people, Black people specifically, but people of color generally. I think it's what prevents people from seeking help and seeking treatment, because immediately that label, that stigma, all those things that you hear, all those rumblings that you hear about people, people don't want that attached to them, and that's a valid concern. It's very valid, because when people take those things that they've heard, those stigmas, they use it to judge you, and they use that to keep you from different things, and people just don't want to deal with that. And that's something that I think is valid. I wish it wasn't the case, because so much of what is necessary when it comes to emotional well-being is empathy and care, yes, and compassion and tenderness, and you know, all these things that people aren't getting. Mm-hmm. And I think that I'm all over the place, but I'll land my.
You're not. You're making complete sense. I mean, you're rolling right into my next question, which I was going to say. You know, I think, you know, are we making good steps towards normalizing mental illness within the Black community? It's always, like you said, it's always been a stigma to talk about. It's just certain things you don't talk about within the Black community, yeah, and mental health is one of them. And we don't talk about our traumas.
It's definitely improved. I've seen the change. In 2009 is when I went on Twitter, and I was having a complete meltdown on Twitter, and people weren't doing that. It was weird. And now everyone will come, like, I'm having a, you know, what day today, and I'm dealing with this trauma, and I'm triggered by this and that. And I think that's fantastic, because now we have the language to explain some of the things that have been mysteries to us in the past. But I think that it's a double-edged sword, because now people have the language and they're using the vocabulary, but they don't have the definitions behind them. They don't have the nuance behind it. So if you walk in and you say, I have trauma from this, trauma is a big word, you know, mm-hmm, and it's bigger than just tweeting about it. It's bigger than just writing a post on Facebook. You need something that has to be done about it. And I think quite often people are using these words in place of seeking treatment, in place of, yes, finding ways in which a healing and wellness can begin. And that's where I know that I'm privileged in the sense that I've always had I've had better experiences with the mental health profession than I've had poor experiences, mm-hmm, but I still think that there needs to be an understanding that there needs to be more than just being able to talk about it. Like, how much do you want? How much are you prioritizing your wellness? How much are you dedicated to being better, despite what you've gone through, as opposed to just kind of living where you are? I'm not sure if that's clear. Yeah. I think that's where the danger comes in. We're talking about it, but we're still not doing anything about it. And I think that there's still a bridge and space that needs to occur.
I don't know if you can expound on this, but I often wondered, you know, especially after reading your book and now listening to you speak about it, I often wonder when we're talking about mental health within the Black community and people of color, is why isn't the same grace extended to us as it is to when they're discussing, when the media or just professionals discussing mental illness within the white community? It seems to be a clear divide, you know, that it's okay for others to say mental health issues are affecting them, but then not the same when it pertains to Black people or people of color.
Yeah. I think that it's, like I said, it's pathologized and then it's criminalized, right? So mm-hmm, if you have a school shooter who goes and you know, shoots up a school, mental health is immediately up there. But if you have the same situation and it's a person of color or a Black person who does it, there's still a mental health issue there. You know what I'm saying? Yes. Like nobody who was mentally well is committing these acts. Yes. But there's a grace and an empathy that's extended to white people that isn't extended to Black people. And I do believe, And I'm not qualified to speak on it fully, but I do believe it's because our stories, our lives are not humanized. We don't get to hear from people. We don't get to fully understand what someone is going through when that person has, a brown or black face. We only know what we've heard. And I say we, and I mean like society as a whole.
Yes.
Because I think that we're also we also do that. We talk about Kanye West. We're not talking about Kanye West's mental health. We're talking about what a jerk he is. We're talking about this awful thing that he did and how he gets on your nerves and how he's doing this and we're pathologizing him, but he has a mental health condition that he has been very open about, that anybody who has read a list of symptoms can see that it correlates, it corresponds, but we're not giving him the grace. We're not giving him, we're not trying to understand and humanize the experience and talk about the mental health and have that lead the conversation rather than the thing that he did that got on your nerves. And I think that once we start having conversations that are well-rounded about Black folks, and I keep saying people of color because I want to be inclusive, but I mean Black people. When we talk about Black people, when we talk about mental health, we never talk about the mental health aspect as its own thing. It's always in relation to something that's wrong, something something horrible that happened to them, or that they, you know what I'm saying? Like, I just really believe that it has to come back to how much empathy and compassion we have for people that aren't doing things that make it easy for us to pity them. And I think that that's the crux of it. It's not about pity. It's not about disdain. It's just about humanity. And I don't think that shows up often enough when it comes to conversations like that.
Yes, preach. So one of the most profound statements, but there were plenty of profound statements in this book, but the one that stood out to me the most is, the lie I tell the most is I'm okay. The lie I tell the most is I'm okay. And that really hit home for me. Can you expound on that statement and like, why do you say it? And do you still have to say it now?
That line, that I'm okay, it means different things to me. It means that I am okay in the sense like I'm fine. When somebody asks, how are you? I'm okay. I'm fine. I'm good. Mm-hmm. That. But it also means I'm okay in that I am a normal person having a normal experience. I'm not dealing with anything beyond the surface that I'm trying to hide from you. I am a normal human being. I am experiencing things the way that people are supposed to experience them. Like, it's a very robotic kind of like, I'm an okay person. I feel okay. I am okay. I'll be okay. That's what it means. And it is definitely a lie that I've told quite often, because I don't want people to worry, because I don't want people to suspect, because I don't want people to look at me like I'm someone who is damaged, someone that needs to be thrown away. When things are great, you focus on them in a certain way. When things aren't great, you focus on them in a certain way. But when things are okay, you're kind of like, it's okay, I'll leave it. You know what I mean? Like, it's right. It's kind of like, it's okay. So to me, okay is the word that means kind of like, maybe if I stay over here, they won't notice. They won't suspect that something's wrong, and then they won't focus on it so much that I have to be forced to do something. So that's what that means. And do I still say it? I absolutely do. I do. I think that for me now, when I use it, it's more kind of discernment. When everyone doesn't need to know everything, Yes. So, when we started this, if you would have said, how are you? And I've been like, I'm okay. It is what it is. I'm okay.
That's it, right?
We move on to the next thing. Like, the focus of this conversation isn't how I'm doing. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So I use it then to deflect, to defend, to dismiss, I'm trying to find another D word, to Yeah, just to keep things
Defer.
moving. That's what I use it for now, to defer. There you go. Thank you. To defer. But yeah, that's how I use it now, and I definitely still use it. But I'm also very aware of the fact that I no longer use it as a shield. When I'm not okay, and when I'm not okay to the point where it's concerning, I am actively doing my best not to use it, and to make sure I have the language and the words to say what I actually do feel. And you know, just a couple of weeks ago, I was feeling weird, and I don't know, and a lot of having a diagnosis is not being sure, am I tired or am I depressed? Am I excited or am I, floating into hypomania? Am I nervous because it's okay to be nervous right now, or am I having anxiety? It's always this negotiation of your emotions. So because I know that, I have to be very careful about which words I use and what they mean. I won't say that I'm anxious if I'm not. I'll say nervous. I won't say that I'm depressed if I'm just sad or disappointed. I'm very careful with the words and language that I use, because I think that in my experience, these words mean so much that I can't use them carelessly. And okay is a word it's okay to use kind of carelessly for me, so yeah.
So speaking about the D words you use, deferment and I forget them already, but how do you protect your peace? Are there certain people you avoid, certain activities, things in general? How do you protect your peace?
Yeah, absolutely. I've been saying lately, and it's true. My mental health and my mental wellness are the singular most important things in the world to me. And it doesn't mean that other things are important, but if I'm not okay, then those things, I can't deal with them. I can't take care of the people that I love. I can't be present for the people that I care about. So I am going back to this question you asked about what's going on in the world. In order for me to stay that way and remain that way, I have to be very careful about the news that I take in. Yes. I don't, I have to go looking for news. I'm not going to just sit and watch it and get agitated and get, worked up. There are relationships that I no longer have because I realized that the relationships were either predicated on me not being well, and the people in those relationships needed me to be a broken person in order for them to understand who I was, and that's not something that I was interested in. Or there are people that, for some reason, when I'm around them, I am I'm trying to think of the word. I'm not okay. You know what I mean? Okay. I'm stressed out. I'm worried.
Right. Yes.
Look at my phone to see if they've called. I'm, concerned about whether or not they're upset with me, and it yes. triggers all these things. And it's not necessarily about that person. It's about how I respond to that person. So for me, I have to trust that there's a reason why that happened, and I have to remove that, and I have to remove myself from that situation. Going back to the question again, I have to remove myself from, I was on 5 or 6 group chats. I have to remove myself from all of them, because if one person was popped up to talk about something terrible in the world in one group chat, and I avoided that, then someone in another group chat, and then someone, they were all kind of bombarding me. And it was getting to the point where every time my phone beeped or vibrated, I would get a little panic. And so I went and I told each and every one of them, listen, I can't do this. I gotta leave. You need me, you can text me directly, but I can't be in this group anymore. And I think that in some of the groups, people took it a little personally, because that's the interaction. That's where, yes. That's where we socialize. We didn't talk outside of that. So it kind of felt like I wasn't interested in what they were going through or whatever, but I can't be useful to people if I'm not okay. I can't be useful. I can't be a good friend if every time my phone vibrates, I get a jolt. Yes. That's not healthy for me, because if it could be the weather report or it could be a tragedy, but my body responds the exact same way. I feel the same way to both those things. So I need to figure it out. And it means that I have work to do too, which means I have to be more vigilant about birthdays and make sure I reach out and make sure that I'm checking in with people to see how they're doing.
Yes.
So it's work for me in that way, but it's the trade-off because I cannot be in this situation where everyone just knows everything about everyone because we're all in the same group together. So it means that I've got to work on my friendship skills because I'm trying a little bit harder. And then I'm also learning, who I'm actually really friends with, because we use that word friendship, right?
So
you think
loosely,
your friends. And we're friends because we went to school together, or, we're in a group chat together for 3 years, or this, that, and the other thing. And if it's like, if I'm not checking on you and you're not checking on me, it's like, maybe we have an acquaintance.
Yes.
We're acquainted, which is fine, which is fantastic. But I think that removing that kind of pressure, especially now, is important. Not just for me. Like, I welcome anybody who needs to step away from a conversation with me for whatever reason. Like, I've learned the difference between what's mine and what exists for other people, and not taking that on. If you need a break from me, take it. I am exhausting. I am a lot, and I get it. I get it.
I was going to ask if people respect your boundaries.
They do, because I'm very firm about them. I'm very clear about them, and I don't waver. If you text me after 10, you're not going to get a response. If we're chatting about something and every time it is like a litany of, and I'm going to say this and I'm going to qualify it, if it's a litany of complaints, and I do not mean people who are going through things. I mean, God, the girl at the store did this and this person did that, and this person cut me off in traffic, and I'm just so, like, all that stuff. Like, after a point, I'm going to ask, is there something else that you need to is this coming from someplace else? Because every time we talk, it's somebody else who's getting on your nerves in a way that's very, very specific to you. And I don't say it like this. I'm not like I'm not
I understand.
a therapist. Yeah, but I say something like that. But then if it's like, no, I'm just mad, then I've learned to say it once, say it twice, then stop responding. So the next time you do speak to me and it's not about that, I'm right there. I'm there with you. When it starts to devolve into, just something else, I have to step back from it, because I also don't want to start complaining about things and people. And, I have to be very, very careful about how I respond. Like, I take a second every single time I have an interaction to make sure that the response I'm about to give is a pure one. And that's work. It's part of the price you pay for wellness, I think. It takes a minute. And so anything, again, that steers me off of that path, anything that is not, that doesn't feel good in a way that is, that won't disturb the long-term goals that I have about my wellness, I cannot participate. And I'm saying it and it sounds harsh, so I'm trying to soften it, but it's just
it's real. Yeah, it is what it is.
Yeah,
that's what it is. So I have to ask you this, because I listened to the audiobook not once but twice, and the first time I had to take several breaks because it was just it was heavy to me, and so I want to know, because you narrated. And how was the narration for you going through that? And I'm going to tell you, the part that really took me out was when you were going minute by minute of your day. And I just want to know, how was that for you to narrate that? Because I know for me as a reader and as a listener, it was very, I don't even have the words. It was just I don't want to say profound, because it kind of just blew me away.
Yeah.
That I'm in your mind, and you're stepping out your day. You're stepping out your day for me. And as difficult as this day was, I'm just thinking, how was it for you to narrate your story?
It was very difficult. There are parts that I was just crying through. Like, I don't know if I didn't hear it, so I don't know if they like did some like audio magic to like fix it, but there were parts where I was just crying. that's the first and last time that I've read the book from start to finish. Like I don't know if I'll be able to do that again. But it was difficult, and it was difficult in that I stepped outside of myself for a while. I started feeling bad for this person, this Bassi person who was going through all this, and like, is she okay? Is she gonna be okay? You know, and I had to like check myself quite often and like, no, you're fine. You're literally reading this. You're fine. But it also did a thing where it facilitated the path that I'm on now, because I've never looked at my story in completeness before. I've never seen it that way. I've always been a collection of failures. I've always been, I did this and then that happened. I did this and that happened. And I did this and then that happened. And I've had a pretty, you know, I've had so many chances in my life. I've had multiple careers. I've done well, but I've also done poorly. And I've always just fixated on the poor part. I'm like, I was doing great, and then this happened, you know, and that was my story. I was always the failure. I was always the down. I was always, and then something else happened. And reading the story and reading it the way that I did, and narrating, it took about 2 days to narrate the entire book. I was able to say, you keep getting up, like you keep trying again, and you keep being given opportunities, but you're given the opportunities because you worked for them at some point. And every time you come back up, and now you are like, and talking to myself, like now you are literally reading your story that's about to be published. It was about 2 or 3 months before it was published. This is up. You're up right now. And even if you fall tomorrow, there's always this, there's a record of you always getting up. There's a record of you always doing it again and doing something else and trying again. And so I was very, this is going to sound so bad, but I was very inspired by my own resilience because I never thought of it that way before. I've never thought of myself as resilient. I've only always seen myself as someone who has failed several things, and not someone who has been able to try several things. And I think that's where I am now. And that's been the motivation for the new things that I'm trying now. And it was a very difficult read. That particular essay, to go back and to remember and start to like feel and see everything that was going on that day, because I remember that day so clearly, because that was the moment when I could no longer deny it. I was like, there is something wrong. I don't know what it is. I don't know what to do about it, but I can't pretend it doesn't exist. So that day sticks out to me very clearly. And then not long after that, I was, diagnosed. But yeah, it was tough. And I think the one of the last essays. All the names change so often. I don't even know what it's called in the book anymore. But the one about Peter's dead. I definitely cried throughout that and reading that entire essay. I definitely cried. I can't remember what it's called now.
I'm pulling it up. When We Bleed.
When We Bleed. Yes.
When We Bleed. So I highly recommend for the audience, if you all have read the book, I highly recommend that you listen to the audiobook as well. It is phenomenal. So I'm going to read something to you and tell me, does this bring back a memory for you? Because I love this. If you get lost, just stand there until someone finds you. Someone will always look for you. Someone will always miss you. I love that so much. And can you tell us where that came from? So share with the audience.
That is a poem called, I think it's called Like Sometimes. It was my first appearance on Def Poetry Jam. And I wrote that poem. I was in Washington Square Park in Manhattan, in the West Village in Manhattan. And I was sitting in the park. And again, this is before a diagnosis, but now I can say that it was a depression that I was going through, and I felt lost and I felt lonely, and I felt I had just moved to New York, and I was longing for for a home that I couldn't find and I couldn't think of. It wasn't Maryland. It wasn't Prince George's County where my parents were. It wasn't Oklahoma where I was raised. I didn't know where it was. And I felt really lost. And that poem was very grounding to me. Because one of the things that has kept me moving and kept me going has been the fact that I've never denied, or I've never been able to forget that people care. I've never felt that. Yeah. I may not felt liked, but I've never felt loved. I've never felt unloved. I've never felt uncared for. I've never felt like if I could just figure out how to ask, that I wouldn't receive help from somewhere and somebody. For some reason, that's never left me. And I think that's what saved me so often. Because had I ever fallen into that level of hopelessness, I don't think I would be here today. And I think that line in that poem was something that was a refrain for me, because someone is always looking for me. Someone is always looking. And I think that a large part of why I became a performer is like, if I didn't show up for a gig, people would notice. Right. If I didn't, if nothing else, people would notice if I didn't show up, or if they noticed if I was late, or if they noticed, and I needed that compass, and I needed that as like not a compass, but like as a North Star to keep going, because I knew that there's always somebody, at least one person. Not the whole world couldn't be pissed off at me. There's one person who cared, right. And that person, I was going to find that person, and they were going to help me somehow.
I have that poem bookmark. I love, because you say sometimes silence is the loudest kind of noise. And I just think it's absolutely beautiful. I do. I'm glad I got to revisit it before this conversation. I think we're going to open up to questions pretty soon, but I want to say that I heard that, we both are Prince George's County residents, but I heard that you wrote part of the book at Bowie Branch in the library.
I did. So after, I used to go to New Carrollton Library, and I hadn't gone in like years, to the point where when I finally was like, all right, I'm going to go to the library, it was shut down for renovations. And I was like, well, dang, where's the other library? And I had passed Bowie Library, but I just never went in. I was like, I just went in. They had also renovated, but before. So I walked in, and they got these like little cubby holes. Like, you walk in, and it's like these 5 or 6 chairs, but they're like enveloped. So you kind of like, it's like an egg almost. I can't, it's like a cat. I can't even describe it. But you'd go in, you'd sit, and you have a little table, and you had all the stuff to plug in your phones and plug in your laptop. And I would just sit there from like, I'd get there at like 10 in the morning, whenever it opened, and I would stay until, sometimes I would stay until Bowie High School let out, because then it would just get too loud, and I was like, all right, it's time for me to go. But when I was in the thick of it, I would stay there from 10 a.m. until closing, just every day, I think for about 2 or 3 months, except for like on weekends, I would do this. And then I hit a wall, and I realized I needed to go away. I needed to go to Brooklyn to write. But I wrote a large part of the book in Bowie Library, and I did a lot of the editing in Bowie Library.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
Yeah.
So we have a couple of questions. So someone asked, what advice do you have for caregivers of those with mental illness?
My advice is that they also go to therapy. I think that quite often caregivers are preoccupied with getting the people they care for to therapy and trying to convince them to go. And I think that it's important for the caregiver as well, because so much of when you're trying to help somebody, you kind of get lost in the helping, and you get lost in trying to be there for them. And I know that at my most, I'll just say at my most difficult, I was a succubus. I was unintentionally taking a lot from people because I didn't know how to survive on my own. And I needed people to remind me of things, to eat, to sleep, to, whatever. And And once I became aware of that, I realized that I needed to be, a lot of my wellness now is being held, is because I'm accountable to the people who care about me. I remember my parents' faces, and I remember my brother's face when they were concerned about me, and I don't want that for them. So my wellness is predicated on, or my accountability is in that, knowing that there are people who care, and I need to be okay for those people. I need to be okay for myself, but I definitely need to be okay for the people around me, because I put them through enough. But I also advise that they go and get therapy in order to know how to process the emotions themselves, how to process it, how to take out frustrations, because it is okay to be frustrated and angry and fed up and tired and all of that of being a caretaker. So you need an outlet as well. You need an outlet as well. And then you also have to, and this is coming from somebody who has been in a terrible state, you cannot want someone to be better than they want to be. You can want it for them, but you can't want it more than they do, because then you will always be, you won't be a caretaker, you'll be a crutch, and a crutch is not helpful. A crutch is not healthy. It can't be one-sided in that way. And you need the tools to learn how to do that. And you need the tools to learn how to deal with that other person. So it's something that I personally feel like everybody should be in therapy, regardless of who or what they are. But specifically, if you love or care for somebody who lives with mental illness, I definitely think so.
So on Twitter, correct me if I'm wrong, they call you the mental health whisperer.
No, who calls me that? Who calls me that?
I've seen that in a couple of articles. I've seen it on Twitter, and I'm thinking, that's how people reference you. Did you know that?
I didn't know that. I jokingly call myself that because I can tell, and this is part of, being hyper vigilant and hyper aware, which is something that comes with having to navigate and negotiate specifically bipolar disorder without treatment for years. But I can tell when somebody is either depressed by the way that they type, or the things that they're saying in their tweets, or the things that they're posting, or how fast they're typing. Like if I go to bed and I see someone tweeting and I wake up and they're still tweeting, I'm like, this sounds manic. And every once in a while, and I do it less now than I did before, because I'm learning self-care in that I can't take on everybody's thing, but I will slide into DMs and hey, are you good? Do you need support? What's going on? And honestly, 9 times out of 10, I'm accurate. It sounds like a terrible parlor game, terrible party trick, but I know what it looks like for me. And because I'm so, and it goes back to writing the book. I think the reason why the book was able to be written that way is because I paid such close attention to myself, and I paid such close attention to every movement, emotional movement, that I can recognize it in other people. And I can recognize when someone's lying and saying they're okay. And it's just something, I've changed the way I respond to it, or how I respond and how I approach it. But I can still pretty much tell, I think. Yeah.
This is a very good question, because I often thought about this too. Do you see quarantine as a detriment to those dealing with mental health who have lost those social obligations, as you described for yourself earlier? So
absolutely.
Great question.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially for people who live alone. I'm not a doctor, so I can't, definitively tell people how to handle that. But I do know what works for me, and what works for me, like I said, is making myself accountable. No one has said to me, you need to check in. No one has said to me, you need to do this, but I know that I need that. I know what I need to be okay. And if I know that social interaction is something that I need, and I've learned in my experience during this time, social interaction is not that important to me. I thought it was, but I've learned that I can get that interaction in other ways and be perfectly fine. But I definitely think that that's one of the things that people aren't talking about. People are talking about the physical impact of quarantine, and people are talking about the economic impact, and they're talking about, education, and they're talking about all those things, but they're not dealing with the mental and emotional health. And I remember a couple of weeks ago, the government had said something about something, and I said that there are people who are going to die long after this pandemic is over, because the emotional and mental toll that it is taking on people is not being held in account. It's not being taken into consideration. And that is something that I think that, and again, I don't know what the answer is, but I definitely think it is. And I definitely think that there has to be more of a conversation about that. Whether it be part of the Medicare or Medicaid or, health insurance for everyone, whether it's part of that, or just knowing that when people are going back to work, when people are moving from a place of isolation to being thrown back into society or into a community, there are things that need to take place, and people are not okay. People are struggling. People are struggling in a really weird, in a really real way. And again, I wish I had and this is what we need to do about it, because I know that I come from a place of privilege where I've had mental health and emotional, resources in place for a really long time. And I know that a lot of people don't have that, but I do think that it is detrimental to a lot of us, especially those of us who live with mental illness and also live alone. And I wish I had answers, and I apologize for not having the answers, but
the acknowledgement is good.
There has to be more put in. Yeah, there has to be something in place, and yeah.
So let me see if I can squeeze in a couple of more. Can you speak to the importance of prioritizing mental health and wellness of students and teachers in school?
Well, I think it's very important. And I can speak to that. It's definitely important. Again, I think when going back to our earlier conversation, our earlier topic, we do not consider. Okay, the only way for stigma to be reduced in this country specifically is for mental health to be considered just as important, if not more important sometimes, than physical health. If I remember when I was in high school, we had a counselor, but it was a career counselor. We didn't have somebody who would be there for us emotionally. We didn't have somebody who would be able to understand some of what students were going through. So many of the fights, so many of the poor grades, so many of all these things that we find disciplinary actions for, whether it be suspension or failing or whatever, all those things that we could be amended and taken care of if the kids had some sort of mental health and emotional well-being, if the teachers were trained for that. Not the teachers, because I think that teachers have enough on them, but if they were mental health professionals in the school in lieu of security, in lieu of yet another administrator who was just there to tell people to get out of the halls. I think that it's important for people to learn mental wellness coping mechanisms and learn healthy ways to manage their health, that manage their mental health. The same way that we're taught to take physical care of ourselves. We have the tests in PE to make sure that the kids are physically well. I think that we have to have that for emotional wellness as well, especially starting from a very young late age. If you think about, if you start considering a child's mental health in kindergarten, imagine the adult they would be if if they knew that their emotions were being considered, if they knew that their emotions were valid, if they knew that they had a place to talk and be able to work out some of their frustrations that they may not have the language or the opportunity to do elsewhere. It would change so much about our society. It would change so much about the ways in which we interact with each other. It would change so much about the way we consider each other. It would change our approach to empathy. It would change the way that so much of what's wrong with society now would change if we had more solid understanding and more solid pillars to aid in supporting our mental health. For teachers, I feel that too. Because of who I am, my son goes to a private school in PG, and there was a moment when I wasn't as in touch. Like once they get into middle school, you kind of like, they're kids. If the teacher says that they're being disruptive, they're probably being disruptive because they're 12. And you're not going to get punished for it, but I'm also not going to make a big deal of it. But I remember going up to the school for something and having a conversation with some of the teachers, and I was like, "Oh, y'all are tired. You need someone to be able to talk to, so that you're not coming to school and taking out your not taking out the frustrations. That's a little bit dramatic, but when somebody cuts you off in traffic and then you spill your coffee on your way into the office, and then you get into the office and then somebody says something to you and you snap at them. Like they didn't do anything, but you've already started that day. And I think that teachers have that too, where something happened. And yes, in a perfect world, you shouldn't bring that you shouldn't bring that out with you. You shouldn't, but people do that. We all do that. And I think that teachers have it in a way where they need to also be able to I've had a conversation with my son's principal where I was like, you guys have a counselor. You should use her. You should, when you want to suspend people or send a note home or send an email, you should call her in and have her talk to the kids that are arguing or the ones who are talking a lot. I remember when Kobe died in January. This is a school that's predominantly brown and black, and I know a lot of these kids are athletes. And I was on my way to the gym, and I get a call. I get an email saying that some people are being disruptive, and I wrote back, and I was like, you guys understand that yesterday Kobe Bryant passed away, and they're adults who are not handling it properly. Yes, there are children who are probably not handling it properly because there's also a child who died. And that needs to be a conversation. Don't. It's not a conversation with me about who was talking and who wasn't talking. It's about what were they talking about. It's about why were they laughing? Do they need to laugh because the alternative was being really sad about something they couldn't process? Are you having a conversation with them? So I do that as a parent, and I do that because I know what that experience is. But I do think that there needs to be more administrative ways of handling things like that, and considering the fact that these children are children and they're human beings and they're people with emotions that run the gamut, who come in with the bad mood and they're in a bad mood for a reason, and either you validate that reason or you give them space to have a bad mood every once in a while. And I think that we're not raising robots, we're not raising army men, and even those, they need, that kind of support. I think so much in the world would change. I'm talking a lot and I'll stop. But I think so much in the world would change if we were much more dedicated to our emotional wellness on a global scale as a society, as a community. So
I appreciate you saying that they're not robots. I think when I was raising my kids, I always used to say, you're a person, you have valid feelings, you have valid emotions. I will give you the platform to speak about your emotions. Doesn't mean that you're not going to be punished for the consequences of what you've done.
Exactly.
But I do recognize, that you are people and that you are valid, and you should be able to speak about your emotions. So I did my best to do that when I was raising my kids. One more question. Oh, so someone asked, when you found, and I think you answered this earlier, but I'm going to read the question in its entirety. When you finally decided to seek help, what or who prompted it, and what support groups or other services would you suggest?
It was prompted by, in the book I talk about, Alice, who was the stage manager when I was on tour. And she's the one, of course, I was very careful about how I wrote about people. I didn't want to tell anyone's story for them. But she and I had a lot of conversations before I was ready to admit that everything was wrong. And she, if it wasn't for her taking the time to talk to me about her experiences and walking me through things in a way that was, that made sure that it wasn't scary for me, I wouldn't have done it. But then on top of that, I mean, my motivations for staying were different. I just want to get back to work. I didn't care about anything else. I just want to get back to work. And in the process of getting there, I learned some things along the way. So I had to find like a brass ring, you know, like something I had to give myself. And even now I do this. I give myself something to work towards. And in a perfect world, you know, you don't need a reason to want to be well. You don't need a reason, but you know, you do need a reason every once in a while. You do need something to hold on to. And so I had that, and I just kept moving that thing. And then on top of that, I my family, like I said, I hold myself accountable because I have people in my life who have invested in my wellness, and I owe it to them to try. And I do try because of them. I don't want to ever be the source of pain in that way. I've lost some people I've lost some people to depression, and I know what that feels like, and I don't want to be responsible for someone feeling like that over me. And it feels like something outside of myself, but it is sometimes when you can't find it for yourself, you need to look for it outside, and which is not the healthiest thing to say, but if I don't feel worth it, I know somebody else does, and I have to be present enough for them. As far as other resources, I don't know. I've only been in therapy. I'm not someone who does well with group therapy. It just feels so personal, and I'm not comfortable with that. But I've heard that helps a lot of people, especially for those who are unable to. Oh, let me back up. Maryland State has the best state health insurance. I mean, I lived in New York, and it wasn't as good. Like, if you can't afford therapy, or if you can't afford it out of pocket, look into Maryland State insurance, because it's been flawless as far as I'm concerned. I've been on for the last 10 years or so. You see the doctors that are there to help you. They're not just there because you can't afford anything better. They're just as good, if not better, I think, than others. So I don't know. I don't know if I answered that question.
That's good No, that's good information. Definitely. That's great information. I think our time is up. I can't believe it's gone by this fast. This has been an amazing conversation. Yeah, we've been on for about an hour, so it's been great. There's Nick.
I'm back. Well, thank you both so much for this really, really meaningful conversation. We appreciate both of you bringing your insights to our community, and for being willing to share your own perspectives and stories. We really are proud of both of you for being Prince Georgians. We're so grateful that you are here making our community a better place every day, just by being here and sharing your work and your families and everything. So,
can I just say one last thing? Please. I wanted to bring up, sorry. I went to Greenbelt Middle School and Eleanor Roosevelt High School. So I am Prince George's through and
amazing.
Through and through. Good, very
You're going to end up on some of our boards pretty soon.
I'm down.
Yeah. So thank you also to Shantae and the Black Caucus of the American Library Association. This is our second event in our new author event series, and also to our friends at the County Human Relations Commission, who have been wonderful partners over the years. We have some very special events coming up that I'd just like to plug real quick before we shut down.
Yes.
Tomorrow night, we have the latest episode in our series called The Elephant We Don't See, a Diversity Dialogue, led by Michelle Hamiel from the library and Kyla Hannington of the Human Relations Commission. They'll be discussing Blind Spot tomorrow night. On Wednesday, we have our next monthly open mic event, guest hosted by Lady Di, with a special appearance by Grace Cavalieri, who's the state poet laureate. You can register for that. It's free. It's at 7 o'clock, open to all ages. And then on Tuesday, September 1st, we have Jason Reynolds, another one of our wonderful hometown heroes in the literary world and everything world.
I love him.
So tune in on Tuesday at 7 o'clock for Jason. He'll be interviewed by Roberta Phillips. And then on Wednesday, Wednesday, September 9th, we have Dr. Michelle Harper, who will be joining us. She is a native Washingtonian. We'll adopt her by proxy, but her new book, The Beauty in Breaking, a memoir, is a really amazing story of her life and journey, both in this area growing up and then also in the medical profession. So we encourage you to check all of those out. You can visit us at pgcmls.info or on social, wherever you are, and get all the information. And I'm sure you'll be seeing repeated posts from me on all of those incessantly for the next 2 weeks. But we appreciate both of you. Thank you again to Shantae.
Thank you.
We'll see everyone again soon. Good night.
Great. Thank you
And
so
thank
much.
you.
Good night.
Thank you, PG Library System, for everything that you've done since I was 13 years old. I lived in the library the entire time, and even during this quarantine, if it wasn't for ebooks, I don't know what I would do. So thank you
Oh my
guys
gosh, yes. The
for
ebook
having that.
download.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing that. It warms all of our hearts when we hear feedback like that. So thank you. Okey-doke.
Thanks so much. Good night.
Good night.
Bye. Thank you, guys. Thank you. Thank you for being